Throughout challenges, difficult conversations, and attempts at reconciliation, this story shows that belonging goes far beyond signed papers. It is built day by day through understanding, forgiveness, and the courage to start over. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to follow every new chapter of this inspiring journey. Share in the comments. For you, what truly makes a house a home? The rain pounded on the shake roofs of a typical American suburb between quiet, tree-lined streets and immaculate front lawns. The neighborhood, made up of houses with white picket fences and green yards, looked like a picture of a stable life. But for 19-year-old Jake Miller, that night would mark the end of any idea of stability. The Miller house was well known around the block. Red brick face, the stars and stripes waving by the garage, a porch with 2 rocking chairs. But for Jake, that home had lost its shine since his father passed away and his mom, Emily, married Rick. Rick brought his 2 teenage daughters into the house with habits and values very different from Jake's and his mother's. The atmosphere, once warm, had become an arena of classic American family tensions. Arguments over space, money, chores, but above all, respect. At a dinner tense with hard looks and few words, Rick got straight to the point. "Jake, it's time to grow up. You only work part-time, you're not in college. This house is getting crowded. Why don't you get your own place?" Jake looked at Emily for support, but his mother just lowered her head, torn between her quiet debt to her new husband and her silent love for her son. His stepsisters grinned in complicity. This was their moment. The house was, finally, Rick's family's house. With nothing left to say, Jake went upstairs, packed his blue school backpack, now his only baggage, and headed for the door, passing suitcases discreetly left in the hallway by the family. As he crossed the rain-soaked lawn, he felt the chill of rejection mixed with the pain of his own mother's indifference. On the sidewalk, he stopped for a final look at the house. Lit windows, life going on without him, just like in thousands of American homes, where family conflicts and unexpected evictions happen far from the public eye. But as he walked away, Jake remembered a secret that could change everything. Hidden in the basement documents was a clause, an inheritance from his grandfather, stating that the house, since he was 10, was really his, held in trust until he turned 21. His family, lost in routines, had never read the original papers, and Rick had never suspected. Jake pulled out his phone and called his uncle in another city. "Uncle Bill, is it true what Grandpa said about the house?" "Yes, Jake, that house is yours. They have no idea." The night stretched endless, but Jake now had a spark of hope. What had seemed like the story of just another rejected teenager was about to become a twist that would surprise his entire family and the neighborhood. An ordinary but profoundly American drama. The Greyhound bus rattled down the interstate, its windows smeared with rain. Jake Miller sat slumped near the back, backpack between his feet, the house lights and picket fences of Maplewood shrinking in the distance. The ache in his chest was worse than the cold seat beneath him. He felt like a ghost, unseen, unheard, erased from the only place that had ever been home. He'd spent the night at Uncle Bill's small apartment in Everett. Bill, a trucker twice divorced, had listened in silence, his stubble scratching a coffee mug as Jake's story spilled out. Every detail, every silent betrayal. "I'm so sorry, kid," Bill had said, "but you know what? You're not alone. Let me see if I can track down those papers tomorrow, but for now, get some sleep." But Jake couldn't sleep. He kept seeing the house in his mind, not the house of tonight, where Rick ruled and Emily averted her eyes, but the house of 1,000 memories. 4th of July barbecues, his dad teaching him to ride a bike in the driveway. The old oak in the backyard, its tire swing now gone, replaced by a pristine trampoline that belonged to Sarah and Hannah, Rick's girls. Everything Jake had known was being erased, repainted, claimed. The next morning, Jake borrowed Bill's bicycle and pedaled to Maplewood Public Library. The librarian, a gray-haired woman who'd known Jake since he was a kid, let him use a computer even though his hands were shaking. He searched property records, wills, trusts. It took hours, but finally Jake found it. A deed of trust signed by his grandfather, recorded at the county clerk's office 15 years earlier. The house, the whole property, was legally in his name, held in trust until his 21st birthday. Rick and Emily had never noticed, never questioned. The relief was dizzying, but the anger was worse. How could they not know? How could they not care? Bill, reading over Jake's shoulder, whistled low. "Well, kid, you hold all the cards now, but think before you play 'em. That house, it's your home, but it's also the only place your mom's ever lived. That's a lot." Jake nodded, but inside he was churning. He'd been left out in the rain, literally and figuratively, by the people who were supposed to love him. Now he held the power to turn the tables. But what did that mean? Revenge, redemption, forcing them to see him, to acknowledge him for the first time in years. As twilight crept in, Jake stood across the street from the Miller house. Lights glowed in the kitchen window. He could see Emily moving around, Rick laughing with his daughters at the table. For a moment, Jake thought about walking right in, dropping the papers on the table, watching their faces crumple. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of his dad's voice. Maybe just the dull ache of wanting, above all, to belong again. Instead, Jake pulled out his phone and texted Emily. "Mom, we need to talk. It's important. For both of us." He waited on the porch steps, palms sweating, heart hammering. If she ignored him, that would answer one question. If she came, maybe, just maybe, there was still a way home. Jake's text to Emily lingered in the air for what felt like hours. He paced by the rusted swings in Maplewood Park, the same ones where his dad had pushed him as a kid. He didn't expect her to answer. Wasn't even sure what he wanted to say if she did. But he needed her to see him, not as the awkward stepson, not as the misplaced teenager, but as Jake Miller, her son. When his phone finally vibrated, his stomach lurched. "Meet me at the Pancake House, 11 a.m. Simple, unemotional, no emojis, no love. But it was a meeting, and that was enough. The Pancake House was a relic, unchanged since the 80s. Vinyl booths, checkered tablecloths, the smell of grease and syrup thick in the air. Jake arrived first, sliding into the booth by the window, watching families laugh over stacks of pancakes, their normalcy a stinging contrast to the knot in his chest. Emily walked in alone, her blonde hair tied back, no makeup, wearing the same blue sweater she always did when she wanted to feel home. She sat across from him, eyes darting, fingers tugging at her sleeves. For a moment neither spoke, then quietly, "I'm sorry, Jake." Her voice cracked. I didn't know what else to do. Things with Rick, they're complicated." Jake stared at his untouched water, rage and longing twisting inside him. "Complicated? You just let them kick me out? Like I was nothing? Like I never belonged there?" Emily's hands shook as she reached for her coffee, then pulled back. "That's not true. You do belong." She looked up, tears pooling. "But you have to understand. Rick's girls, his job, all the bills. I couldn't fight him on everything." Jake's chest tightened. Here was his mother, once his fiercest defender, reduced to excuses. It wasn't greed or malice that had silenced her. It was exhaustion. The suburban dream had turned into a cage, and she'd picked survival over loyalty. He reached into his backpack, slid an envelope across the table. "Read this." Emily frowned, pulling out the deed of trust, the county seal at the bottom. Her eyes widened as she read, then flicked up, searching Jake's face. This can't be right. Your grandfather. Jake, is this real?" He nodded. "I never knew. Uncle Bill told me after I left. Grandpa put the house in my name in trust until I'm 21. Emily's breath hitched. For the first time, Jake saw something like hope. or fear flare in her eyes. Rick, he doesn't know. The girls don't know. No? And I don't know what to do with it. Go to a lawyer, throw them all out, sell it. Jake's voice was steady, but inside he was shaking. I wanted to talk to you first. Emily reached across the table, clutched his hand, her touch warm, desperate. Jake, please let me talk to Rick. Let's find a way to fix this for both of us. But Jake pulled his hand away. This isn't about fixing, Mom. It's about choosing. You chose them over me. Now I have a choice too. Silence fell between them, heavy with all the things unsaid. The memories, the betrayals, the love that still flickered beneath the hurt. Outside, a minivan pulled into the parking lot, kids tumbling out, laughing, carefree. For a second, Jake imagined a different life, one where his dad was still here, where he and Emily made pancakes on Sunday mornings, where home was safe. But that life was gone. All that remained was a deed, a house, and a boy who'd learned too young that love and loyalty aren't always enough. Emily wiped her eyes, looked at her son, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. Whatever you decide, Jake, just know I love you. I always did. Jake swallowed hard, the words both a balm and a burden. Love wasn't the question, belonging was. He stood, slid the deed back into his bag. I need some time to think, but I'll call you. I promise. As he walked out of the pancake house, the morning sun breaking through the clouds, Jake felt the weight of the house, his house, pressing on his shoulders. The next move was his, revenge, reunion, or something in between. But for now, he had something he hadn't felt in a long time, a chance to belong on his own terms. Jake's hands clenched as he walked down Maplewood's leaf-lined sidewalks, the brownie suit still crumpled into his backpack. He'd left Emily in the diner, the scent of pancakes and coffee lingering on his jacket, the ghost of her words. I'm sorry, Jake. It's complicated, still fresh in his ears. It was complicated, but what she meant was, Rick's opinion mattered more. And that hurt in a way Jake hadn't expected. Not just because it was unfair, but because it was so human, so ordinary. He wandered to the only place that felt safe, Bill's apartment on the edge of town. The TV played late-night baseball, the couch smelled faintly of pepperoni, and the man himself was scrubbing a skillet at the kitchen sink, elbow deep in suds. So, Bill didn't turn, just grabbed a couple of beers and tossed one to Jake. You talked to her? She apologized, she always does. Jake flopped onto the couch, opened the brownie, pressed his fingers to the paper, his future, his revenge, his trap. Or maybe, just maybe, his second chance. But I don't know what to do with this. Outside, headlights sliced through dusk, some family returning from a day out, oblivious to the boy in a borrowed apartment with the deed to a house that didn't want him. Jake wondered what his dad would have done, if he'd stand by silently or fight or broker some impossible peace. He didn't know. Bill dropped onto the couch beside him, wiping his hands on a dish towel. You hold the cards, kid, but you're not the only one with skin in the game. Your mom's stuck between two families. Rick's got his girls, and now you got proof. Your grandfather loved you enough not to trust anyone with your future, but you. Jake swallowed hard. But what's the right thing? Kick them out? Sell the house? Forgive and forget? Bill took a long swig. There isn't a right thing, Jake. There's just what you can live with. That night, Jake dreamed of his dad, not dying but laughing, teaching him to rebuild the porch rail after a summer storm. When he woke, the sun was barely up, and he knew one thing. He couldn't make this decision alone. He rode Bill's bike across town, stopping at the office of Old Man Douglas, the attorney who'd drawn up the trust for his grandfather. Douglas was musty, tweed, and straight out of a John Grisham novel. He squinted at the brownie, shook his head, muttered, "Son, you got yourself a rare kind of power. Use it wisely." They talked options, mediation, eviction, sale, even letting Emily live there if Rick agreed to a lease, to pay rent, to Jake. "You're not just fighting for a house, Jake," Douglas said. "You're fighting for your place in the world." But what Jake really wanted more than anything was to be welcomed. Not out of pity, not out of paperwork, but out of real belonging. Maplewood shimmered in late afternoon light as Jake returned to the Miller house, nerves humming. He sat on the porch steps, watching Rick haul the garbage out, careful and slow, like he owned the place. Worse, like he belonged. And for a second, Jake considered walking away. He could sell, split the money, cut ties, but then he remembered the tree he and his dad planted, the window seat where he read comics, the front door he'd slammed so many times, always coming back. He texted Emily, "Come home, Mom, I'm waiting." And then, for the first time, Jake decided this was his house, his legacy. But it would also be a choice, not just a fact. He'd confront Rick, not with fury, but with proof, with clarity, with the weight of what was truly at stake. He only hoped he'd be strong enough to handle what came next. Jake woke to the sound of rain pattering against Bill's small bedroom window. Morning sunlight struggled to break through, casting a silvery, uncertain glow. Today, he would confront Rick, not with anger, but with the cold, undeniable truth. The house was his, in every legal sense. The question was, what would Jake do with that truth? He showered, dressed carefully, and ate cereal in silence as Bill read the newspaper. "You ready, kid?" Bill finally asked, not looking up. Jake swallowed hard, fiddling with the deed of trust. "No, but I need to do this." On the bike ride back to Maplewood, Jake rehearsed what he'd say. He imagined Rick's face, the forced pride, the certainty that he belonged in that house, with Emily, with his daughters, as if Jake had never been part of the equation. But beneath the anger, Jake felt something else. Grief for the mom who was still, in some way, being pushed aside herself. As Jake walked up the familiar flagstone path, his stomach knotted. The house looked exactly as it had when he left. Red bricks, white trim, flower boxes Emily had planted years ago. The only difference was the unfamiliar car in the driveway. Rick's prized BMW, a symbol of the new order. For a moment, Jake hesitated. The door, his childhood portal to comfort, now a barrier between two lives. He knocked, waited. Footsteps, then the door swung open. Rick stood there, broad-shouldered, immaculate, jaw clenched in barely concealed surprise. "Jake, didn't expect to see you." Rick's tone was civil, but the ice was unmistakable. "We need to talk, all of us. Mom, too." Rick hesitated, glanced up the stairs, then stepped back, giving Jake entry without a word. Inside, the living room was too quiet. Emily emerged from the kitchen, her face pale, eyes rimmed red. Had she been crying? The girls were upstairs, voices muffled, TV laughter drifting down. For a moment, it was just the three of them, Jake, Emily, Rick. Silence, heavy with unspoken pain. Jake took a deep breath, slid the deed of trust from his backpack, placed it on the coffee table. "My grandpa set up a trust, the house. It's been in my name since I was 10, 21, and it's mine, officially." Rick's eyes flicked to the document, then to Jake, jaw tightening. Emily's hand went to her mouth, tears welling. Jake continued, voice steady, "I didn't come here to kick you all out, but I need you to know, this house, the memories, the family, the fights, the love, it's always been mine as much as anyone's. You sent me away, but I still belong here. I always have." The room went still. Rick's face darkened, then crumpled. The confident, self-assured man suddenly fragile, exposed. He reached for Emily, but she stepped away, looking at Jake, really looking at him for the first time in years. "I'm so sorry, Jake," she whispered. I should have known." Rick, voice shaking, interrupted. "You could have told us. You could have said something." Jake nodded. "Maybe. But would you have listened? Would you have seen me then?" Silence stretched, thick with regret, with the echoes of 1,000 missed conversations, with the pain of being both present and unwelcome in your own home. Emily sat down, ran a finger over the deed, the paper trembling as much as her hands. "What do you want to do, Jake?" He looked at her, then at Rick, then at the house. His house. "I want to talk, really talk, about what this house means, about who belongs here, about what it means to be a family, not just by law, but by choice." From upstairs came the sudden burst of laughter. The girls, unaware of the storm below, of the shifting foundations beneath their feet. Jake swallowed past the lump in his throat. "I didn't come here to win. I want to find a way for us, all of us, to belong. But I need you to see me, this time, to hear me." Rick sat heavily, ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't realize it was like this. I thought you needed to grow up. I thought we were doing what was best." Jake nodded. "Sometimes families don't realize what they're losing until it's too late. But it's not too late if we're honest with each other." Emily's tears spilled over. "What do we do now?" Jake hesitated, then reached out, took her hand. "We learn to listen, to see each other, to let go of who we're supposed to be for each other, and just be present." For the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Not that everything would be perfect, but that it could be different. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The Miller house felt different in the days that followed Jake's revelation. Still fragile, like a truce in a war no one wanted to admit they were fighting. Conversations were careful, eyes darted away at the dinner table, and laughter no longer echoed freely in the halls. Emily had pleaded for patience, for understanding, for time. But as the weeks passed, Jake sensed the unspoken divide widening. The house was his, but the family, real, messy, and uncertain, was another matter. Jake knew it was time to get serious, not just about the property, but about healing. He contacted a mediator, a retired family court judge well-versed in the emotional landmines of inheritance. Not to force a resolution, but to give everyone, himself, Emily, Rick, even Sarah and Hannah, a safe place to speak, and harder still, to listen. The mediation took place at the Maplewood Community Center, a neutral space bathed in soft sunlight, far from the memories and resentments of home. Jake walked in feeling exposed, as if he was about to lay his heart on the table along with his legal rights. Emily was pale, her fingers twisting nervously. Rick sat rigid, unreadable. The girls, wide-eyed and unsure, clung to each other. The mediator, a calm, gray-haired woman, began with a simple question. "What do you each hope to gain from today?" Silence stretched. Then Jake spoke. "I just want to belong. Not just because of some paper, but because we choose each other." Emily, voice quivering, "I want to undo the hurt. I want my family back." Rick hesitated, then admitted, "I don't want to lose everything, but I don't want to steal either." The air was thick with tension, vulnerability, and the fear of loss. Not just of property, but of identity, of place, of love. The mediator led them through the process. Everyone spoke, everyone listened. The girls, too, were heard, haltingly at first, then with the fresh, unguarded honesty of youth. "We never asked to replace anyone," Sarah said. And Jake saw, for the first time, the uncertainty in her eyes. "Sometimes, I wish we could all just be okay," Hannah added. They talked about the house, not just as a building, but as a vessel for birthdays, late-night talks, fights, forgiveness, and goodbye. The mediator helped them see past the immediate conflict to the deeper questions. Who gets to belong? On whose terms? And is love really stronger than paper, paperwork, and pride? As the hours unspooled, something unexpected happened. The family began to map out a future none of them had imagined. Not Jake throwing them out, not Rick ruling the house, but a tentative, evolving arrangement. Shared space, shared responsibility, shared memory. "Jake, if you're willing, we want to respect your grandfather's wishes," Emily said. "But I hope you'll respect our wish to stay together as a family, even if it looks different from before." Rick, surprising everyone, suggested a lease, legal, clear, fair. And for the first time, instead of talking at cross purposes, the family talked with each other, exploring possibilities, pain and practicality side by side. When the mediation ended, there was no sudden hug, no flood of happy tears. But there was a quiet understanding. The house was Jake's, but the future was theirs to shape together. Not as adversaries, but as allies in an experiment called family. That night, Jake sat alone on the porch, the cool air soothing his raw nerves. He thought about the generations that had passed before him in this house, the stories buried in the floorboards, the laughter soaked into the walls. It wasn't about winning. It was about finding a way to let everyone belong, even if it meant redefining what home really meant. He wasn't sure yet if it would work. But for the first time since his grandfather's secret had changed everything, Jake felt something like hope. Not just for himself, but for the imperfect, messy family he'd almost given up on. The Miller house no longer belonged to just one man, Jake, Rick, or Emily, but to the fragile, evolving collective they called a family. After the mediation, the air in the house changed. It was as if, for the first time, everyone saw each other not as threats, competitors, or mistakes, but as people trying to carve out a new normal under the same roof. The mediation hadn't solved everything, but it had carved a path forward, one that required compromise, respect, and a constant willingness to listen. Living together as a blended family meant navigating a web of routines, memories, and expectations from two different worlds. Jake's bedroom, once his room, was still his, but now he shared the house with Rick, Emily, and the half-siblings who had arrived in his life years before. The kitchen, once a battleground, became a meeting ground, sometimes awkward, sometimes joyful, always messy. Each meal was a negotiation: what to cook, who sat where, who cleaned up. There were no scripts, just trial and error, and a growing tolerance for the uncomfortable. Bedtime became a patchwork ritual. Some nights Jake stayed up talking to his mom, others Rick's girls studied at the dining table, while Jake retreated to his room with headphones. There was little expectation of harmony, just honesty. Slowly, new habits emerged: pancake breakfasts on Sundays, family movie nights every other Friday, and a shared chore chart that listed everyone's responsibilities, blending old rules with new ones. They even planted a garden in the backyard, Jake and Rick digging side by side, Emily and the girls planting flowers, a small symbol of something hopeful taking root. But tension never disappeared entirely. Rick's daughters, Sarah and Hannah, struggled with Jake's sudden ownership. Why should he have a say about what happened with the TV, the Wi-Fi, or which dishes went in the dishwasher? Jake, for his part, tried not to lord his legal authority over anyone. He wanted cooperation, not capitulation. It was a balance, and sometimes it tipped. There were arguments over curfews, phone use, friends visiting, even what music to play in the living room. The house, once silent with resentment, now buzzed with the messy, honest noise of people learning to live together. Emily, caught between worlds, worked hardest to keep peace. She reminded everyone, herself included, that being a blended family wasn't about erasing the past, but about making space for everyone's stories. She spoke often of her late husband, Jake's father, and tried to find ways to honor him. Old photos on the walls, stories told at dinner, traditions kept alive. At the same time, she made room for Rick's history, his habits, his daughter's needs. Jake noticed something unexpected. The house started to feel like home again. Not the home of his childhood, but a home still. There was laughter in the kitchen, arguments in the hall, and sometimes, when no one was looking, moments of quiet connection. He found himself teaching Rick's youngest how to ride a bike. He and his mom made old recipes together. He even managed a civil conversation with Rick about the lawnmower. The neighborhood noticed the change. The Millers, once the picture of a fractured, awkward family, now hosted backyard barbecues, invited neighbors over for holidays, became in a small way a new model, a family not bound by blood alone, but by choice, by effort, by shared space. But real blending took more than just cohabitation. It meant respecting boundaries, forgiving slips, and always remembering that people matter more than property. When Rick and Emily sat down with Jake to formalize a lease, an agreement where they paid rent and Jake paid the bills and upkeep, everyone signed with a mix of relief and trepidation. It was a contract, yes, but also a symbol. Family wasn't just a name, a deed, or an accident of birth. Built day by day, even when it was hard. As summer faded into fall, Jake walked the quiet streets of Maplewood, the house a glowing beacon behind him. He wasn't just the owner anymore. He was a brother, a son, a stepson, and, slowly, uncertainly, part of something bigger than himself. As the seasons turned, the Miller house settled into a new, uneven rhythm. There were no tidy endings, no grand reunions or perfect forgiveness, just a family learning to navigate a reality more textured, more honest than the stories Jake had once imagined for himself. The challenges were real. Jake and Rick's daughters, Sarah and Hannah, still grappled with their own sense of displacement. Sometimes the girls would pull away, resentful of the reminders that Jake held the deed, that their place in the house was, in a sense, borrowed. They weren't wrong to feel this way. Blended families are rarely seamless, and loyalties, routines, and identities take years, not months, to bend and blend. The rivalry for space, attention, and parental affection simmered beneath the surface, flaring at small moments. Who sat where at movie night, whose friends were allowed over, whose interests were honored in family decisions. Emily carried the weight of every adjustment. She was both mother and wife, torn between the family she'd known and the one she was building. She worked hard to create new traditions, Sunday breakfasts, summer barbecues, holiday photo albums that somehow included everyone. But she couldn't erase the past, nor would she want to. Some nights, she'd retreat with Jake to the front porch swing, just the two of them, to talk about his dad, their memories, and the ache of change. Rick, for his part, tried to respect Jake's ownership, but the role of step-parent never fit quite right. His authority, once unchallenged, was now a fragile thing, negotiated, questioned, and sometimes resented. The lease made it formal. He contributed, but held no equity. For a proud man, it was a daily surrender, and for Jake, it was a constant reminder that relationships, not rules, were the true measure of home. Money mattered. The lease had changed everything. No longer could Rick unilaterally decide about repairs, upgrades, or how family funds were spent. Shared expenses were itemized, negotiated, sometimes argued over. The lawnmower, the Wi-Fi bill, the groceries, all became shared decisions, each a tiny act of trust and vulnerability. This was the reality of blended families, the financial stress of supporting a larger, more complex household, with both biological and stepchildren needing resources, opportunities, and attention. There were glimmers of generosity. Sometimes Rick paid extra, sometimes Jake allowed the girls to have the bigger birthday party, but always the unspoken question lingered: who really belongs? The community too had a stake. Neighbors who'd watched generations of Millers grow now saw a family both fractured and reformed. Some cheered the tentative truce, others whispered about betrayal, inheritance, and the strange new American family. Jake learned that belonging was never just about what happened inside the house, but how the world outside saw you. Yet beneath the struggle, something quietly astonishing happened. Jake, once expelled, found himself not just tolerated, but sometimes truly welcomed. He and Rick barbecued together, awkwardly, then more easily. He helped Hannah with her algebra, listened to Sarah's college worries, sat with Emily as she sorted old photos. The girls, for all their jealousy, sometimes sought his advice, his acceptance. The house, once a battleground, became, in fits and starts, a home for all of them. If you asked Jake what belonging meant now, he wouldn't have just one answer. It wasn't about the deed, not really. It was being seen by his mother, not as a burden or a memory, but as her living, changing son. It was the grudging respect he earned from Rick, not through legal leverage, but through patience and honesty. It was the small, daily acts of inclusion. The girls saving him a seat at dinner, the neighbors waving as he mowed the lawn, the feeling that, for all its cracks, this family belonged to him, and he to it. As autumn approached, Jake sometimes sat on the porch, his home, and watched the world move on. He wondered if his dad would be proud, if his grandpa ever imagined this outcome. He thought about the future, how the house might change hands again, how families evolve, how belonging is always a negotiation of space, of history, of heart. The story would keep unfolding. There would be graduations, jobs, falls, fights, and reconciliations. The Miller house wouldn't always be peaceful, but it was, at last, honest. And in that honesty, in the daily messy work of rebuilding, Jake found something rare and true. He belonged not just by law, but by love, choice, and the quiet courage to keep showing up.